Hello, you're here with us on a new episode of Melt. I'm Ritvika Gupta, and on the show today we'll be speaking to Nadia Chauhan. She's the joint MD and CMO at Parle Agro, and Jessica Walsh, who hardly needs a formal introduction. She's an illustrator, designer, and partner at Sagmeister and Walsh. Anant Rangaswamy, editor of Melt, had a rather interesting chat with them. Hi, Anant.
Hello.
Anand, so your conversation with Jessica and Nadia was actually about how they use design in their creative work and marketing. So tell us a little bit about the chat and how important do you think is design today in communication and really strengthening a brand?
I'll answer the second question first. I think design is huge. I mean, we live in a world where we buy an Apple phone because it's an Apple phone. We got Hyderabad shutting down over weekends because of IKEA.
Right.
All these are design-led brands. But when design comes into FMCG, which is what Parle Agro's products are, which is, products which cost 10 rupees or 15 rupees or 20 rupees unit price, and then they're using design to sell it or get a greater market share, that is exciting. Right. So, I do think that design can be used anywhere, and I think the fruity, happy experience is that, yes, design can communicate with all classes. Nadia tells us that, from the richest to the poorest, all demographics, design can cut through. And basically, I wanted to see what design does for them.
All right, so let's have a look at the conversation. Let's get ready to melt with Nadia Chauhan and Jessica Walsh.
Hi, Nadia. Hi, Jessica.
Hi.
So, Nadia, starting with you. I've spent a long time in advertising, commenting on advertising, and I haven't seen any brand. And personally, I haven't seen any brand which focuses so much on design in their communication. Design in corporate identity or design in even the way an office looks or design in some elements, POP, POS perhaps, but design which drives the communication I haven't seen before this with a focus such as yours. Why do you rely so much on design in your overarching, shall we say, communication strategy?
Anant, I would say it was an accidental discovery, actually.
Right.
It's not something that we consciously said we were going to do.
Right.
But a few years ago, when we rebranded Fruity, the entire rebranding process, we had reached out to people who weren't from companies that weren't associated with brands in India,
right.
Mainly because Fruity, being as old a brand or having as much history, a lot of people came with certain notions about the brand, a certain baggage.
Right.
And we wanted to work with, people who'd come with a completely fresh perspective, help us really unleash the potential of Fruity and not really have that baggage. And when we were doing that, we did the entire design for the packaging with Pentagram, but then at that point of time, we had also reached out to Sagmeister and Walsh and to Jessica, and that's when we actually got to know each other.
You also was in Pentagram, so
No.
yes, once upon a time.
Were you?
Yes.
Oh,
Many.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Okay. Right, so and we just had a very brief conversation actually on the phone, and I had emailed her and talked about just our vision and what we wanted to do and the challenges we were facing, and they had worked on the entire communication piece for the launch of the new packaging because for a host of reasons that we connected a little late, and hence they worked on the communication piece at that point of time, and it was driven by a very, very strong visual language.
Right.
During the time when they developed that, there were lots of other advertising agencies at that point of time who were also pitching for our business because we were moving to a new company to handle the entire advertising, and many did. Almost everyone actually did.
Everyone
and
who we invited
pitched for the business at that point. And when we looked at all the work in front of us, I think what we had from Jessica was such a solid visual world for the brand that actually just shed the baggage just like that. You suddenly saw Fruity in a world that you never saw it before, and it wasn't forced, it wasn't unnatural, it just fit into that world really very beautifully. And it was just a perfect platform to launch the brand, and that is really where we discovered the power of design in building a brand. Not just on your packaging, like you said, but in the communication and in that entire world of that brand. So since then, I mean, even in terms of the amount we've invested on static mediums like print or like outdoor, which we never had in the past, we were primarily a TVC driven company. We felt that just constantly amplifying and building that world and having that world register in the minds of the consumers was evolving the brand so beautifully that since then to now we have been growing in rank, we've been growing in market share, we've been growing rapidly, and today just about four years since then, we hold the number 2 position nationally, and we've in fact also hold the number 1 position in many markets in India. We went on to then taking it up for Appy Fizz as well, and like I said, it was an accidental discovery, but it's a discovery that has really paid off, and now we are very conscious about the fact that we want to continue building our brands through the power of design.
Right. Now tell me, like in advertising, it's very apparent that advertising created for, say, a market like Brazil does not work in India simply because the insights are different, the idiom is different, and so on. Now, what Jessica brings to the table is very sophisticated design. Now tell me, therefore, does it stop at a particular demographic and not go below that, which you might want it to do? Is there a danger of that happening? Is it designed too sophisticated for a market like India?
I think that good design is appreciated by anybody and everybody. Right. India as a market is extremely visual, and if you go to any part of India, the length and breadth of India, you see beautiful colors, you see a lot of design everywhere around you. I think that that's something that's really been underplayed in that sense. Now, while I say that the entire design element, I think that it doesn't have a demographic limitation, right, or a limitation, because we're not designing something like as minimally as, say, a brand like Apple does, which might have a far more sophisticated sort of an appeal. We do have design that is very much in your face, and which is something that we've seen that the country really does enjoy and respond well to. In terms of just the whole cultural bit, or being able to penetrate or talk to people, in the deepest parts of the country, that is really where our magic, I think, comes together. I think that we both, really work very closely in ensuring that we're bridging the cultural gaps. There's a huge amount of cultural appreciation that takes place every year when we're talking about the objectives of that year or the objective of the communication for that year, and talking about who we're talking to, or what challenges we're trying to overcome in that particular business challenges in that particular season, and what are the various things that we need to do even tactfully. So I think that it's a relationship that's really evolved very beautifully and with a lot of trust. I think that she trusts me in a lot of my opinions or judgment of the market or what the market needs, and likewise I trust her on all that she delivers to us, and the work that we eventually execute together.
So Jessica, come to you. So why do you think your work works in India?
Well, when we were first starting out the project, we just started by looking at the advertising landscape in India. It started with just Googling images of India and seeing all the hoardings and what we noticed. And then, of course, we came to India and were taking lots of photos and studying. And a lot of the ads were so dense with type. And when you did see images...
You're talking only print ads at the moment.
Yes,
right.
Type, and when there was image, it was a lot of clutter. And it was just not really standing out. So when we're thinking about how to stand out from the clutter, we're thinking, could we create a visual language that didn't rely on so much copy to speak with people? And we think design can do that. As Nadia was saying, it's really a visual language we created, and we can use design in a way to speak with people and break through the clutter and create joy or make people think about things in a different way.
Yeah. Tell me, would this visual language work again in Brazil or in Indonesia? It was paratropped, or is this a language that you evolved for a particular market, which is India?
We developed, especially for Fruity, a visual language that could work across all different languages or cultures. Yeah, we're always trying to create and hit on that universal aspect. Even with the humor that we have in the commercials, we're always trying to get to that universal humor. So even if you didn't understand what they said, you would still laugh and get it.
with the audio off.
Yep.
While Jessica says this would work anywhere, Parle dropped into Indonesia, whatever. Have you found in your research that it works as well, for example, in the Hindi belt as it works in South India? Have you measured it? If you have you found it done?
The communication is actually built for what the brand is doing.
Right.
So even today when we've got ads that are running down in South, the music for those ads are very different from the music
Jessica involved in the music?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
In the entire process, we've been working with Amit Trivedi for the last few years, considering he's been part of the entire journey, and he's worked with us on the music on both brands every year. The language, a lot of the visualization, a lot of the music, even the storytelling. In fact, if you look at Happy Fizz, it's a complete narration in Hindi beginning to end of the entire film. The entire philosophy is in Hindi. It's conceptualized and created in Hindi. So I think that these limitations are in our mind. It's the world has become a smaller place. It doesn't have to be perceived as so complicated. I think that what we've done together is really made something very unique for the brand, and that is working for us in each of the markets phenomenally. I think that there is not a single doubt whether I don't even have to do research. There are enough people writing about it every. Of course, our sales tell us that. That's today we are one of the fastest growing beverage brands in the country. The last 4 years, since the time of the revamp of our branding and communication, we have been rated as the number one brand and top of mind consistently. We've been growing in market share. We've been leading the category growth rates. Today, Happy Fizz is growing at 75% with absolutely no capacity to actually go further. We would have been growing at 150% if we were. So it's obviously working.
Jessica, now some cues that she's been using. You worked with each other for 4 years, which by duration is very unusual in the Indian advertising market now. Very few brands can say we worked with a communication partner for 4 years. How important is the longevity of relationship? What makes next year better than this year, or this year better than last year? How important is longevity?
I think having a close relationship and working together year after year just keeps making the partnership even stronger. Now we just know each other so well. So when we talk, it's immediate. We get it. If something's not working, the conversation's just that much easier. The changes happen that much faster. And understanding the culture better and better every year through coming here, I just think strengthens the work so much.
So now we've also learned words like trust. We've heard relationship coming from both of you.
Yep.
So how important is trust? Nadia, you're the one writing the check, so you have to do more of the trusting. How important is trust in this?
No, I think it's very important. Respecting each other is also important. I think that what's also unique in this, if we have to call it a client and agency relationship, is the fact that...
what do you call it? Do you call it client and agency?
No, we don't at all. It's a brand partnership,
right.
very, very clearly. It's a very unique one. It's across different continents. We're working more digitally. Everything is over some collaborating softwares that we use, and it's unique. But what makes it more unique is the fact that owners in both places are very self-involved. So today, absolutely every single thing that we are doing, I'm involved in and she's involved in, and she's as serious about her work as I take my work, and I think that that's really critical. Today there's at no given point of time am I fighting for things like timelines, or am I fighting for okay, we can do better. I think that both of us are very ambitious, we're both very driven. We want to do what it takes to do something that is better than whatever we've done in the past, and that's what allows us to collaborate so well. We're driven by the challenges that we face, and it's a great partnership.
Now you've mentioned 3 partners. There's you, there's Jessica, there's Amit, who you brought up.
Yeah.
Let's say there has to be a fairly robust process.
Of course.
Because timelines are important. Your trucks have to roll out with your goods and so on. So work backwards,
Right.
everything else has to work. So tell me a little bit about the process of how you and Jessica work.
So So at the beginning of, much before the beginning of every year, we sit down on defining very clear business objectives for the coming year, the various challenges we see, the opportunities we see, the vision most importantly, and we define a lot of that. We get deep into any of the brands that we need to get into discussions on, and we constantly look at ways of improvising. So for us, like 2020 is an important year. We've been doing this now for the last few years. 2020 is a year we're really looking at driving greater disruption in the marketplace with all the work that we do around the brands, so that's one of the things that we're in talking about in meetings at this point of time. That's why she's here as well, to really put in place everything that we need to do for 2020. Yes, timelines and all of that is important, but I think that, like I said, that it's a very different relationship. It's not like when you work with agencies even in India. It's something that we've had to learn and evolve in our own ways of working when we've been working with them. You can't, there's a lot of respect to the amount of time it takes to develop certain work, and from there and there's respect to a timeline that they've committed, which is why those are never conversations that we ever have. It's clear from day one. I think that our focus of the conversations that we have are on a much larger platform, on a much more strategic platform, or on a much more creative platform, and I would say that's much better use of energy as well.
Now, coincidence or otherwise, this from the time I was a consumer of your product, it was a Tetra Pak brand, and now you moved considerably away from Tetra Pak. I'm not saying you don't have Tetra Pak, but now you have your metal cans, you have glass bottles, you have PET bottles, and what is the role of design in that? Did design help you make certain decisions, or it was
no, packaging decisions are led by various business needs, and and a large part of our, there've been of course changes in our packaging, and whether it's in terms of graphics or it's in terms of structure or an overall brand identity change as well. But in terms of the format per se, has been primarily driven based on larger and older objectives as well that are continuing.
Right. Now for you, it was a business challenge because the Tetra Pak business meant a whole lot of Tetra Pak brands were completely dependent on Fruity or Happy doing well because they were built on Fruity and Happy. And when you go into cans and so on and so forth, the capacity of those plants decreases while other capacities have to be built or invested in. So how was that a challenge for you?
Today the two markets, it's not really cans that dominate the market. It's the two markets are really the PET bottles, which are which have grown as a format very fast in India and are the preferred format today in terms of the category that we operate in. Tetra Pak continues to be a very large part of our business and continuing to be a growing part of our business. All of these, when you talk about Tetra Pak, it's in fact the reverse. The capital investment in Tetra Pak is far higher than that in PET. So it's much easier for local brands or to invest in their own PET plants. So it's actually the other way around. It's not, I wouldn't say that's the challenge. It's really, keeping up or continuously supporting the growth that we are seeing in the market with infrastructure that's growing fast enough to support that. I think that is really, when I say infrastructure, it's not just on the manufacturing side, but it's also the sales and distribution infrastructure. There are cons today with Happy Fizz and the kind of growth that we're seeing from Happy Fizz. The need to expand infrastructure probably at very phenomenal speeds is really the biggest challenge. So it's more basis that than on the production side that we see any kind of problem.
Jessica, this is very different from what we say design work, in the sense you're involved in an FMCG product. You can't get more FMCG than this. You can actually, you can do soap, which I don't think you're getting into.
No.
But tell me, what are the peculiar challenges to this kind? Because it's more advertising and less design in terms of the way clients perceive the role. She might have gone, like her consideration set was a whole lot of advertising agencies, and then you happen to be there. So what are the differences for you in dealing with a client who wants advertising output as opposed to only design output?
Well, we actually do quite a lot of advertising output as well. Yeah. I mean, with each type of client, it's a different challenge. We actually like working with very diverse types of clients. So we don't just do beverage brands, like we do across everything. And we actually find when it's something new, whether it's a new culture or a new challenge we're taking on compared to what we've done before, it's actually works in our advantage because we don't have all the baggage of the constraints. And Nadia always approaches things that way as well. Like, don't worry about the constraints. Think about the craziest idea, the riskiest idea that we can go into market with, and we'll figure out a way to make it happen. Which I think working at a company of this scale is amazing to see that you're willing to take that kind of risk.
So when you take these joint decisions, who takes the rap if things go wrong? I'm a little confused. You love each other so much. What happens if things go wrong? What happens? No, in a normal advertising agency relationship, you say, the communication didn't work. Now what happens if it's so sort of joined at the hip? The decision making.
It's actually very simple and quite objective in that sense. Almost probably every single year since the time we started, about a week and a half after the campaigns go live, it's followed with a note from me to her based on what I'm feeling. As and I mean, as you do it year after year, I've been doing it for 14-15 years, you kind of get a sense of whether your campaign is going to work or not. So I always send out a note. For us, every year is about doing better than what we did the previous year, and so it's really important to understand why a certain thing worked or why a certain thing didn't work. At the end of the day, I think making TVCs, it's not just her and it's not just me. There is a film director, there's an entire production crew. It's about a lot of things that people are seeing in their minds and eventually executing that. So there is a certain inherent risk involved in making a TVC in general, which I think that we're all quite aware of with just our experience of it of the past as well. But if ever something does go wrong, we do analyze it in detail. We try and figure it out. We look at it very objectively. I think that while we both are passionate about our work, we're not so attached to it that it it blinds us from why we are doing it. I think that we are both very clear at the end of the day, we are doing it to grow these brands. We're doing it to build this business, and we're doing it to achieve certain key objectives in the market. And at any point of time when we think we have not achieved it, for whatever be the reason, we sit down very objectively on it and thrash it, and look at how we're going to move forward.
Jessica, would you have done better if you had an office which was 500 meters from here, and you're sitting in New York and she's sitting in Bombay? It's nice, but it's not ideal, is it?
I think having these trips are super important, which we do yearly or twice a year. But I think we work very well even from afar. And I think, as Nadia mentioned, we're both so passionate that it doesn't matter if that means for me staying up till midnight, till 1 a.m. to speak with Nadia on the phone, or we actually do quite a lot of communication via Basecamp or other, even text messages. So I feel like we're in communication almost every day.
Yeah.
So the communication is quite strong, and I think that's what is so great about the digital world we live in now, is that you don't have to be down the street to have a really strong relationship.
Thank you, and all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that was a conversation. On that note, it's a wrap on this episode of Melt. I'll see you next week, same time, same place. Don't forget to watch all our content on our social media platforms. Our handle is Ready to Melt. Goodbye.